For more, let's speak to Joel Rubin, Executive Director of the American Jewish Congress and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, joining us from Chevy Chase, Maryland. Joel, great to have you back. Well, let's talk about today. Give us a sense of, in these kind of preliminary meetings, setting these kinds of visits, how those discussions go. How are they feeling each other out about what kind of priorities will be set during these meetings?
Well, Kalev, it's great to be with you. And this is a wonderful opportunity for Prime Minister Bennett to have his team get to know up close and personal both parties and the Congress and how it views politics in Israel and American national security and the intersection between American support for Israel and what Israel's priorities are. And then that can lead into the Israeli engagement as well with the White House, because nothing here in terms of Israel policy is divorced from American politics and the Congress as well. So it's a great opportunity for his team, Prime Minister Bennett's team, to get to know the players and to get a feel for what it is that they're thinking in terms of the whole operating environment here in Washington on Israel policy.
Right. Now, Joel, we know, of course, Naftali, here in Israel, we know what the subject that Naftali Bennett wants to see dominate that agenda, even though there are serious disagreements with President Biden, is the situation of Iran, what's happening in this region. We just saw what happened in the Gulf of Oman, but also the nuclear agreement. Whereas perhaps the Biden administration will also be wanting to talk about the Palestinian issue, maybe Jerusalem a little less enthusiastic about that. How do they work out the balance between those kind of topics on this agenda?
Yeah, Kalev, I do think it is about Iran, and that is going to dominate. That has been the dominant theme for all of President Biden's term so far in terms of his engagements with Israel. He really has wanted to focus on that, and he has talked about the Palestinian issue and about getting it on track. But he clearly is trying to make sure that when it comes to Iran, the United States and Israel are synced up, and that there are no surprises, and that the negotiations that he is leading along with our partners in the P5 are effective. When it comes to the Palestinian issue, clearly President Biden understands that it's critical to ensure that the Israeli government gets its solid footing before any significant moves are made vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. And frankly, the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas understand that as well. So I think there's a little bit of space and time here for that. The people that the Prime Minister's team are meeting with, Brett McGurk, Jake Sullivan, people I've worked with over the years, they are very serious, and they understand that Iran is at the top of the agenda.
Right, but we have to notice that many people thought the Iran deal, the Biden administration would have already revived the Iran deal by now. It looks like it's kind of dragging. How might the Prime Minister Bennett's visit work into that equation when it seems in quite critical stage now?
Well, one of the hinge points that's been holding this up is, frankly, President Biden's insistence that there be a commitment by Iran to continue negotiations beyond just the nuclear issue and to talk about the regional activities of Iran, to talk about their ballistic missile capability. And Iran has balked. Iran has not wanted to engage in that. So I think that there's going to continue to need to be close coordination with the Israelis on that issue. And I think Prime Minister Bennett, he has to feel confident that what the Biden team is doing is pushing forward on Iran policy and on diplomacy. That is one that Israel itself has asked for many years, which is to take care of these other issues, to not just immediately move into a deal, but to look at the bigger picture. And that's where President Biden's team is.
And finally, Joel, how much is this visit a reset for Israel's relations, especially with the Democratic Party after the Netanyahu years?
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a tremendous opportunity for Prime Minister Bennett's team. This is a chance to reset the way Israel is seen by Democrats in Washington. There's an opportunity for Israel to communicate its diverse government, its dynamic governing coalition, frankly, with Arab Israeli parties and leftist parties and also conservative parties, and how this really reflects Israel. I think it's going to be a message that is going to be welcome amongst Democrats. There's a desire to have longstanding bipartisan support for Israel continue, and that's certainly something that Democrats are going to want to hear more about from Prime Minister Bennett's team as to how they're going to do that. But this is a chance to really reset the foundation of that communication.
All right, and of course, there's also going to be a very big stage. These White House visits, always big stages for Israeli prime ministers, and certainly for a newcomer like Naftali Bennett. This will absolutely be the case. Joel Rubin, thank you for joining us again on The Rundown.